You all answered the question of what kind of dragon did you imagine in your mind when I said the word dragon. Now I ask you to tell me in the comments, where does this creature live? Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, and today we are revisiting expectations. Now, if you recall from an earlier video in this series, we were looking at expectations to help give us constraints. We're going to be doing that even more in today's video. We're going to be revisiting some of the older concepts because when it comes to creating your own world space, we have to use expectations. We have to rely on expectations quite a lot. And by doing so, it's going to empower you as the storyteller to create a whole lot of stuff on the fly. And here's the other tricky part, which I particularly love, is it's going to allow your players to create stuff in their own minds that you never even thought of and which you can then incorporate into your game. So that's what we're going to be looking at today's video. Now, before we get going, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, join our legions of GMs because, well, ultimately, it's all about improving our game and, well, you know, we're all like-minded and stuff, you know. Anyway, this week's video is sponsored by CelticKnotworks.com, and I have to say they sent me this little goodie bag and it contained a whole bunch of really cool stuff. Now, the one thing that it contained was this really tiny little thing. And I went, well, what is this? And I opened it up and it is a very small little metal acorn. That's what it is. It's a little Celtic metal acorn. And on the back, it says, start small. Now, how appropriate. Start small. That's where we all start. We start with small adventures, small ideas, small campaigns, and then we get bigger and bigger and bigger and we grow. We plant our seeds. I really, really like this little thing. The most important thing that they sent me, which is something that I was supposed to be talking about, but I was talking about all of the other cool stuff first, was this. It is a portable dice carrying box thing. Now, it is handmade, and it contains a set of really small dice. Let me just open this up here, and you can see how tiny those little dice are. But it's a full set of dice, and they come in all different colors and things. You can order different colors. Anyway, that is today's sponsor, CelticKnotworks.com. Go check them out if you want a super portable, very easy to carry. I'm just going to pop it into my pocket here. And really, really, really fun, cool stuff. Now, back to our expectations. When we talk about expectations, they come from a whole bunch of different places, and I'm not going to dive into where all of our different expectations come from. A lot of it has been pre-programmed into us by our own family backgrounds. Some of it comes from the type of literature that we read. A lot of it comes from the type of media that we consume. So whether that's watching memes or Disney Channel or anything along those lines, a lot of it comes from what we observe and what we know. And then hopefully, if you are expanding your mind, if you're working on your imagination, as we have been speaking about doing for the last few episodes, hopefully it'll have come from your own research and experience and looking at other cultures and things and trying to draw your own imagination and conclusions. So when I ask you, where does the dragon live? Comment, put it in the comments. A lot of that is going to come from your expectations, what you grew up with, where you were taught the dragons came from, or from playing role-playing games. The role-playing games establish that green dragons live in forests, that black dragons live in swamps, and depending on what role-playing system that you're playing, of course. Some have a very different location for the different types of dragons that are out there. And some people had some amazing colored dragons, which you kind of go, well, where would they live? I don't know. I do not know what to expect. We as storytellers, as game masters, have to now play upon these expectations. We have to be able to be aware of what our players are most likely expecting, and then we have to be able to understand how we can control and manipulate that. So as a classic example, I was running a game in D&D in a castle about a month ago now, and 2-3 weeks ago, and my players came up with the idea that they were in some kind of time-traveling scenario. They had gone through a mysterious portal, and now they were convinced that they had gone back in time to, or they had gone forward in time, I should say, to the future. As the GM, it was up to me to decide whether that was true or whether that was false. They were giving me a potential constraint. I had not planned for them to go forward or backward in time. That had never been part of the plan. It would always, the portal in my mind had just led to another continent. But the players were giving me information. They were giving me something. So I had to decide yes or no. I decided yes because my players had come up with it. And I didn't have any reason why it shouldn't do that. If that's what they were finding exciting, if that's what something that was kind of firing off the imagination, I was not going to be the one to say no. But then I had to work out, what would this mean to my campaign? What would I expect from a time-traveling kind of scenario? Why would they have been moved in time? Why would this thing exist, this portal exist in the first place that would move them through time? What would be the purpose of that? So in order to answer that question, research is not necessarily going to help me here, although having watched a lot of time-traveling films, you just watch any kind of Star Trek film, if you watch Back to the Future, there's a classic example of it where they go into the future and they go into the past and they kind of bounce all over the place. It's absolutely, absolutely full of all that kind of stuff, and we all learn about the grandfather paradox. You can become your own grandfather if you go back in time, and then did you have to go back in time in order to become your own grandfather in order for you to... All those kind of wonderful, lovely things come up. We don't have to worry about those in our games necessarily because, well, it's just a game. But we need to be able to do something. Now, obviously, as an experience, we don't have the experience of time changing and that sort of thing, but we can and draw upon our experience of deja vu, where we kind of convinced things have happened before. So what I was then faced was looking at the notion, the concept of time travel. What did I expect from it? This whole thing was a preamble building up to that. What did I expect from it? What did my players expect from it? Well, I was listening to my players most intently once they had come up with this idea, and they did, as a lot of player groups do, they came up with a theory by committee, which was one came up with an idea, another one embellished upon it, and then another one embellished upon that, and then another one embellished upon that. That was not going to work for me. But at least I knew that my players were expecting some kind of temporal anomaly thing to have happened, so I could then play on that. My next step was then to say, all right, let's work this out. Let's work out how this would possibly be there, and let's try and figure out why. Why would this thing be created in the first place? Now, I had created a villain, but the villain didn't give me very much. The villain was just trying to take over the world as they normally do. Until I realized that when you have time travel, you expect the time travel to be for a reason. Generally speaking, time travel doesn't happen by accident. It's a mad scientist who's created a time travel machine and everyone gets pulled through it. Or possibly it is some kind of weird spatial anomaly and you get pulled through it by accident, in which case then, in that storyline, you then have the players trying to get back to their own time. But I didn't really want them to have to get back to their own time. My campaign that I had already started to create in my head did not involve them trying to get back from where they had come from. It was about them entrenching where they were being. It was about them staying where they were. So I didn't want that. So I rather decided, well, we've had the accidental time machine. We've had the intended time machine, thanks to H.G. Wells, where the character intentionally builds a time machine. And we've seen the sort of ramifications of that. So what if, and this is where you apply that whole what if scenario to the expectation, what if someone had built a time machine specifically to bring the players from the past to the future? Ah, well, now that's interesting. So what do we expect from that? Well, we expect them to be brought to the present. We expect them to be attacked. We expect them to have a reason for bringing them here. What is that reason? Well, quite possibly the reason could be to kill them so that in the past they are no longer there to prevent whatever is going to happen in the past. So you take them out of the past, you bring them to the future, you kill them in the future so no one knows that they've died, and then in the past they just simply vanished with no trace. And they can't possibly come back because, well, they're just not there. So that was my warped thinking, looking at the expectations of what had been established in time travel, trying to use the mechanics that I'm going to tell you about to manipulate it to come up with a more interesting story. And then I came up with the story based entirely on what the players had given me. This is the process, folks, that I'm trying to get you into the habit of doing, which is to let the story collectively be formed and created, and your job is to then try and work within what is being created to make it much more dynamic and to give it form and shape. Because once I had form and shape, once I had this idea, I then knew what my campaign was about. My players then had a definite course of action and a sense of direction, and off we went. And of course, they ended up solving the time problem by killing the thing that had brought them from the past to the future. They repeated history, which of course is exactly what the villain, the Nemesis, had tried to avoid. They'd been defeated once before. They brought the players from the past before they defeated the Nemesis so that the Nemesis could defeat them. So then the Nemesis wouldn't have been defeated in the past. Only the Nemesis was defeated in the future as well. So it was a double whammy. And the players just went, this is amazing. This is wonderful. How did you come up with that? I didn't until they gave it to me. Okay, so how did I do it? Well, I've spoken about this before, so you should know all about this. Subvert, entrench, alter, or abandon. Those are your 4 options when it comes to expectations. So if you have the expectation of time travel, you can entrench it. So yes, time travel happens, grandfather paradoxes, all those kind of wonderful things. This is exactly what you expect it to be, and your entire goal is to get back to your original time. That would be entrenching time travel. It would also be a case of showing the characters that time has elapsed by either putting them into the future, where there might be statues of them from the past, which is what I did. I had a statue that the players came across of themselves, but it was ancient to indicate that they had come from the past to the future. You can entrench it by putting them into the future, and then they can see old news clippings of themselves from the past. So you can entrench it, and I suggest that you do entrench certain components of it. You need to subvert it, so that means you need to change it slightly. Give it your own twist. In my case, the twist was it wasn't the person who invented time travel that was bouncing around time. They were using it as a weapon to pull people out of time. Not original. I'm sure there are many, many, many stories that work on that premise. But the idea was that instead of the players being in control or being randomly pulled through, it was intentional. And the reason for that was to murder them in the future so that in the past they stopped existing in a retroactive kind of way. You can then alter things, which instead of subverting them, you twist them up slightly. So the PCs do jump back in time, but they get younger. Maybe that's how it works. Or they hyper age. Maybe that's how it works. So it's all about you looking at those different concepts and saying, okay, how do I tweak these? The last one, which is to abandon, you can just simply go, time travel works differently. In mine, the time travel is actually all in their heads, and when they die, they wake up back in their own time. So they haven't actually physically moved through time, their minds have moved through time, or they're... However you want to do it, you are doing it with constraints that are helping you to shape and go, well, could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be the next thing? And you try it against those 4 different things. You have to make sure, though, that it is clear what you are doing. If you are entrenching certain aspects of it, then you need to abide by those laws that you have entrenched. If you are abandoning it, then you need to abandon the entirety of it and completely make it your own. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is that the players are going, okay, we expect this kind of thing to happen. But then when it doesn't, because you are not following your own constraints, it becomes confusing, and then instead of them having clarity and direction of purpose, they suddenly get lost again, which is the exact opposite of what we want to do. We want them to know exactly where they're going. This hopefully will give you a better idea of how to use expectations when it comes to your world building, because that's where we are at the moment. So when we are looking at world building, whether we are using an existing module or whether we are going to create our own module or our own campaign or whatever it is, we need to rely on these expectations. We need to rely on those 4 things: entrench, subvert, alter, or abandon. We need to have that as our mantra whenever we are coming up with something. because it means that if we are coming up with a cultural activity, we could rely on a cultural group, we could try and subvert or entrench those cultural norms that everybody knows about, we could abandon them completely, in which case then we're making our own culture, or we could simply alter and adjust and go, well, actually the handshake, when you shake someone's hand, you cross hands to shake hands. That's altering the handshake. The gesture is still the same, the meaning is still the same, but it's super easy for you to come up with on the fly simply because you've got in the back of your head those 4 little things. So that's all I'm going to talk about this week on the channel. A big thank you to Celtic Knotworks for providing us with those cool little dice boxes. I've got them still over here. Remember, if you want portable, movable, cool little dice boxes, they're the ones to check out. Lots of different designs. Go and have a look at them. A massive thank you to all of our Patreons. You continue to get NPC cards and NPC adventures. I hope that you're finding them fun. If you are, please just drop a message down below saying, oh, I actually quite find them useful. That would be really kind of you. And give us feedback, of course, on patreon.com. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.